Ladies and gentlemen, the JPC-350 is not a $250 antenna, which I'd like to show you why today. Before you consider buying this antenna, I think you should get to see the overall quality. I could talk about my experience out in the field over the past several weeks, and we can even compare it to the JPC-12 antenna. So that's what we will do today. I hope you enjoy this channel. Thanks for checking out Ham Radio, dude. Let's get started on the bench. Hi, I've been known to disappoint several thousand people in the past, and I expect that this video will be no different. But before we disappoint all of you, I do want to tell you how today is going to go. This will not be a technical review video as much as it is an overview of the JPC-350, then a comparison with the JPC-12, then I give suggestions to the company on how to make their product better, and then I have several other secrets in store to include what antennas you can purchase, notice I said antennas, for less than the $250 that you might find this for in the United States. Let's get started, and I can't wait to disappoint you. To get started in a very basic terms, the JPC-350 is a center-loaded vertical antenna for portable use, covering bands from 80 meters all the way up to 6 meters. We're going to take a look at the quality here, but I do want to mention that just because I said in the title that it's not a $250 antenna, doesn't mean it's not a quality antenna at $125. So keeping that in mind, we're going to go through each of these parts and take a look at the overall build quality, starting with the bag. The bag is about 2 feet in length, and the overall weight of everything combined is about 3 pounds. I will say that the bag has a zipper that has already ripped on me once, and I will also just mention that it does have a nice strap on the back so you can carry it over your shoulder if you'd like, or handles to carry it in your hand. And when you open it up, there's a lot of room to put all of your antenna inside. That's where it was. It was this zipper right here, which has already broke. I'll probably try to put it back together later, but I did want to point that out. Otherwise, all of your components for the antenna can go into here, and again, about 3 pounds. Now, if we were to be building out the JPC-350, we would first start with a spike. The JPC-350 comes with an aluminum spike that will go into the ground, and then you put your counterpoise wires on like this. There's a ring connector at the end of the ribbon cables that is supposed to go over the spike. And when you do it, if there's any kind of angle on the spike, I found that having this little fat part facing down really helps make sure that the connection is good in between the spike and the SL239 connector. These ribbon cables will later be spread out at 30-degree angles. After you have those ribbon cables on, it's very important to put your connector on for your SL239. And this is made of steel, and it's a little bit different than the JPC-12, which we'll show you here in just a moment. But the overall quality is great, uses an SL239 connector, and multiple M10 threaded connectors. The concept is now you would spike this into the ground, and if you have a frozen ground or a hard surface, you do risk damaging your JPC-350 spike made of aluminum. A nice added update to the JPC-350 over the JPC-12 is these nice little wire winders that are made with some sort of metal. I believe these are either anodized or powder coated, and they're really nice. To just make a note, these will also come in handy out in the field for reasons you'll see here shortly. As per the instructions included with the JPC-350, we will want to have 3 separate bunches of the counterpoise wire, which seems to be made of a ribbon cable like you might see inside of a computer. Next up, you're going to go ahead and screw in what I'm going to call an extension bar, what I'm going to call an aluminum tube. And because the JPC-12 also uses aluminum tubes that are a little bit smaller, and I'm in a desk with a small area, I'm going to use this as the demonstration today. In the field, your JPC tubing will be a little bit longer. The JPC-12 aluminum tubing now screws into a coil, which again uses M10 threads and adapters. After you get your coil on, that's when you're going to put in your M10 threaded antenna. Everything goes in very smooth, and the overall build quality is okay so far for a $125 antenna. If we start to compare the JPC-12 antenna to the JPC-350, we start to look from the bottom up, we'll see the JPC-12 and the JPC-350 use the same aluminum ground spikes. The JPC-350 utilizes the same ribbon cables as the JPC-12, and when you get these, they'll be attached all together, and you need to separate them into 3 equal parts, as I just mentioned a moment ago. The JPC-350, however, does include these nice metal wire winders, which the JPC-12 does not. Next, we get to our SO239 connector, or our what I'll call base connector, and the JPC-350 is a little bit shorter. They use the same diameters, and as far as the SO239 connectors, they're also the same. They both use M10 female slots in order to insert accessories like the spike or our extension tubes. The extension tubes are roughly the same. I mentioned that they're the same build quality and they have the same overall concept, whereas the JPC-12 uses 4 of these at about 13 inches or 330 millimeters. Hold on. Sorry, I was way off. 330.2 millimeters. The JPC-350 uses 1 tube at a total of about 20 inches or 510 millimeters. But overall, same build quality. That's when we get to the coil, and there are some differences with the coils. The JPC-350 utilizes the same style coil as the JPC-12, but we can see that it's much larger. In fact, it's about, I don't math larger, but as you can see here, there are quite a few extra coils, which helps us be able to tune in different bands. Again, the overall quality is about the same, and if you wanted, you can go online and purchase the JPC-350 coil for your JPC-12 antenna. And the antenna itself, telescopic whip with an M10 thread, is where the obvious difference occurs. The JPC-350 antenna now becomes approximately somewhere around roughly 17 feet when fully extended. And as you can see here, I've used these in the past. I have videos in the past where I say that these aren't bad antennas, and I still hold true to that, but we will talk about this in just a little bit. I went out to the field to test this antenna and made several observations. Being a coiled antenna system, not only do you adjust the coil for the desired band, but with the JPC-350, you also adjust the antenna length. So for example, if you wanted to be on 80 meters, maybe your antenna's all the way up and maybe your coil is all the way down. Whereas if you wanted to go to something like 15 meters, maybe you have your coil adjusted up and your antenna comes down a little bit. But that's not all. The JPC-350 relies heavily on tuned counterpoise wires. Meaning if you're on 80 meters, maybe your counterpoise wires are all the way out, but as you go up the bands to 15 and 10, you roll up your counterpoise wires more and more and more. So that's why I want to talk about some things that might be difficult today. And I'm not saying it's difficult to tune this antenna if you know what you're doing, but I'm saying there are things that could have been done to make this a lot easier to tune. When you're out in the field and you're trying to determine if you rolled up the proper length, if this is 6 inches or 6 feet, it becomes very frustrating and confusing. And I think that the ultimate solution would be, if you want to test this before you go to the field, you can cut certain spots for your counterpoise lengths as per the relatively rough instructions that are here. This will allow you then to maybe add bullet connectors or some kind of connectors to have linked counterpoise wires. From the factory, that would have made this a more valuable antenna. But I will say, in a positive manner, that's why they gave you these really nice metal wire winders. If we're talking about difficult things, it could be difficult to follow these instructions on how you have to tune the antenna, because remember, we're not only just tuning the coil, but we're also tuning the antenna. And that's why this antenna being so flimsy in this scenario might not be the best thing. For example, here it says that the counterpoise on 15 meters should be around 2.6 meters in length. It would be nice to really quickly, rapidly disconnect that and then say, we need to retract the rod antenna 7 sections plus 27 centimeters from the bottom. So they're telling me to retract this 7 sections and then 25 centimeters. What is a centimeter from the bottom? Chill out, you people overseas. I'm joking. We all know a centimeter is like a centipede. But my point is, maybe there could have been easier things done to improve the tunability of the antenna system as well. And for you at home, maybe you could use a permanent marker, which I do suspect you would have to reapply every now and then, but different colors for different bands.
And this is a reason it's really nice to have a little bit of time to test your antenna before you go deploy it out in the field, because you can make these changes and you can come up with these conclusions of things that'll make it easier in the field to deploy so you're successful with whatever contacts you're trying to make.
Really nice injecting molding on the coil system, and that's great. But one of the hardest things to see on the field, and some of the most confusing things, at least for me, everybody's a little bit different, is which one is gold and which one is red and which one is whatever other color they want today. For example, here it says that the 20-meter band should have the position sliding on the red coil within the white marked area. And when I look at this and I look for the red coil within the white marked area, here in the office, it seems pretty obvious that that's probably it right there. But in the field, if you're inexperienced and you don't know how a coil technically operates, maybe you mistake it for that one right there.
Hey, this is an afterthought, but I just wanted to kind of point out a few things. Number one, as a guy who's making review videos or overview videos, I like to also put myself in the shoes of somebody who might be new and operating, because they're going to face a lot more troubles than somebody who's been licensed for 30 years. So with that, here in the office, I did mention the coil's not too difficult to see, and I really want to kind of describe this real quick so you're not as confused. But when you have the coil on the extension tubes, there's going to be one single marking on the bottom, which is red, and it's in between two white spots, it looks like. Then toward the top, you have what is gold and should be a red marking within gold. As you can see, it kind of faded away. Then all the way toward the top, you have some kind of marking in between two red pieces. I guess it's a silver marking in between two red pieces. And the way this is going to go is on 80 meters. It says you're going to position the sliding contact on the red coil with the gray marked area. That's going to be toward the top. As you go down to 40, you're going to place the sliding contact on the red coil within the gold marked area. So what I'm trying to show you here is the lower the band, the higher it is on the coil, and we continue down the higher we go in the band. By the time we get down to 15, well, actually, it's by the time we get to 20, we're going to position the sliding contact on the red coil within the white marked area, as you can kind of see there. When you get to 10 meters, you remove the extension tube and the coil. You just have the antenna plugged into the SO239 connector. You do the same on 6 meters. But again, in different lighting conditions, that's a little difficult.
The markings are sometimes difficult to read in sunlight and maybe even dark conditions. They could have been painted on a little bit better. That's all I'm saying. Now, one of the times I was in the field and I operated, the ground was very, very frozen. And at that point, it's like, well, what do you do? I just want to point out that if your ground is really frozen, you could heat up the aluminum spike and dig it into the ground. Or I poured hot water onto the ground and somehow I was able to get the spike in, although it wasn't necessarily the easiest thing to do. So I want to alert you about those things because if you're in an environment that's really cold, it might be difficult for the ground spike, and you could do this as a solution. Hold on. I think if you use this solution, you're going to have to concentrate really closely on those tuned counterpoise or radial wires. But you can get a super clamp like this at Adorama, clamp it onto a park bench, and this happens to be M10 right here. So guess what? Basically, I'm saying if it's too cold to put a spike into the ground, this might help you out. While I was out in the field and I had a SWR meter, tuning the coil didn't seem to be much of an issue. In fact, I did get my SWR below 1.5 to 1 on 80 meters. I made contacts on 80 meters. 40 meters, I made contacts. I made a lot of contacts on 20 meters, and I had a blast. And it was all mainly stateside contacts on the first day that I went out. However, I did make at least a couple of European contacts, which is always fun. Last year, I made a video on the JPC-350, and during that video, I showed how you could tune the coil right here, which is really nice. And sometimes it's difficult to get on the ground and actually tune the coil, or it's more toward the ground. So having that coil with the JPC-350 at height level, it seemed to work better for me. Now, I do want to reiterate that all of these parts are what you can consider a la carte, meaning you can go on AliExpress and get this coil added onto your JPC-350. In fact, you could go onto AliExpress and get this for about, I don't know, $9 to $20 US.
I would like to physically show you an example of why the JPC-350 is not a $250 antenna as you might find it here in the United States. And if I were to go to AliExpress, of course, this is going to be on your own due diligence to find the best deals. But I take a look here at the JPC-350, that's $111.34 plus no shipping. The reason I chose this one is it had free shipping, where some of them that are cheaper will have $100 shipping. So we're at $111 for a JPC-350. We have a full antenna system right then and there. Now we go ahead and we add the antenna, which is a 5.6 meter antenna for $12 with free shipping. I guarantee you it's about the same quality. And I also want to point out real quick that the JPC-350 antenna I was referring to earlier, I kept saying it was 17 feet. It's 5.6 meters, and I misspoke. Then we add the induction coil for the Pack 12 or the JPC-350. You could actually use it on the Pack 12 to help you get 80 meters, but that's $41 plus $8 shipping. All in all, in total, we're at like $182.98. So where I'm going with this is instead of paying $250 for a JPC-350 antenna in the States, you can go onto AliExpress, Banggood, or wherever. I'm not telling you where to shop, although I will leave an affiliate link below. And you could essentially have two main antenna systems. I forgot the extension tube, but you could find that.
But I do feel like, as cool as the antenna is, I do feel like if some of those upgrades were made, for example, instead of having a coil like this with hard to reach markers, maybe you find a way to make a coil like this with very clear to define markers where they are. I did that. Or, maybe you use a different color and then you have white markings or blue markings or red markings, something to clearly distinguish what band you should be on. I know it's not that easy with injection molding, but that could go a long way for the overall quality of this antenna. I've already mentioned several times about the counterpoise wires and how I think it would be really cool if there was a linked system on there. To the folks over at BD7 JPC, please feel free to run with any of these ideas to bring a cool, affordable antenna to the market. Just make sure it has the name Dude on it if it's good quality. On top of adding links for the counterpoise wires, which would make it super easy, the other thing I could see being done is to upgrade the antenna. Now, I mentioned how inexpensive this antenna is for you, the consumer, to buy, which means it's even cheaper to purchase overseas. But I also do know another thing. I know that an antenna like this, which is much better quality, nearly comparable to the Chameleon, in my opinion, would only run a few dollars more in China, and this one happens to be a 25-foot antenna. with much, much better quality. I think it's very cool to be able to give companies like BD7JPC those suggestions and hopefully see them improved on in the future. But I also know that you like to build things. And don't worry, because here in the future, I'll show you where you could download the Fox Ripper coil. I know it's a unique name, took me all night to think of. However, to conclude today's episode, no, the JPC-350 is not a $250 antenna. Yes, it does work and it is fun if you consider it as a compromised antenna system. But if I knew what I knew when I knew what I knew, I don't know. What I'm trying to say is if I knew what I know now, I probably would have bought all the upgrade accessories for the JPC-1 2, thus turning it into a JPC-350, thus having multiple options for field-ready antennas. It's currently 5 below now. It is currently 4 below 0 Fahrenheit, 3 below 0 Fahrenheit, and it's just a little cold for me to be able to go out and perform all the tests that I do wish to test. If you could be respectful in the comments and let me know what testing you would like to see, we could either do a live stream once it gets warmer, or I could bear the cold if we get 2,000 likes. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed this overview of the JPC-350. I hope you have a good one. Thanks for watching the channel. Please consider liking, commenting, subscribing, and 73.